Jaya Yasodanandana Jaya Brajjandaranjana Jaya Brajjandaranjana Jaya Chamundathirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Chamundathirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Yasodanandana Jaya Brajjandaranjana Jaya Brajjandaranjana Jaya Yasodanandana Jaya Brajjandaranjana Jaya Brajjandaranjana Jaya Chamundathirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Chamundathirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Chamundathirvanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamunnatirvannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Govindana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Govindana Vallabha Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Girivardhari Jaya Yasodanandana Jaya Brajjana Ranjana Jaya Brajjana Ranjana Jaya Yasodanandana Jaya Brajjana Ranjana Brajjana Ranjana Jaya Jamunnatirvannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jamunnatirvannachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasani Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna. Nityaka Haribo, 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 Gora Haribo. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pradrajagacharya Svatara Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai Gaura Premanandi Haribo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 8, The Character of Bharat Maharaj. I'll read the summary. Although Bharat Maharaj was very elevated, he fell down due to his attachment to a young deer. One day, after Bharat Maharaj had taken his bath as usual in the river Gandaki and was chanting his mantra, he saw a pregnant deer come to the river to drink water. Suddenly, there could be heard the thundering roar of a lion, and the deer was so frightened that it immediately gave birth to its calf. It then crossed the river but died immediately thereafter. Maharaj Bharat took compassion upon the motherless calf, rescued it from the water, took it to his ashram and cared for it affectionately. He gradually became attached to this young deer and always thought of it affectionately. As it grew up, it became Maharaj Bharat's constant companion, and he always took care of it. Gradually, he became so absorbed in thinking of this deer that his mind became agitated. As he became more attached to the deer, his devotional service slackened. Although he was able to give up his opulent kingdom, he had become attached to the deer. Thus he fell down from his mystic yoga practice. Once when the deer was absent, Maharaj Bharat was so disturbed that he began to search for it. While searching and lamenting the deer's absence, Maharaj Bharat fell down and died. Because his mind was fully absorbed in thinking of the deer, he naturally took his next birth from the womb of a deer. However, because he was considerably advanced spiritually, he did not forget his past activities, even though he was in the body of a deer. He could understand how he had fallen down from his exalted position, and remembering this, he left his mother deer and again went to Palaha ashram. He finally ended his fruitive activities in the form of a deer, and when he died, he was released from the deer's body. So it's, as you can see, there's aspects of this pastime of Bharat Maharaj, which, I noticed that some devotees never quite understand how he managed to fall down from such an exalted position. There's almost an anxiety that if we go along as devotees, that one day we'll just fall down and disappear. Of course, the problem is we do see that happens. So it's not unfounded, but the very nature of this pastime is so that it doesn't happen. So we read this pastime in the sense that, oh, this may happen to me, but the pastime is there so it doesn't happen to me. So we have to try and understand it, take this opportunity. And as I said, don't be like many devotees I've seen that after 20, 30 years, they're still, why did he fall down? We have to understand straight away. Now we've got one verse up here, yeah? We'll read that, and then there's not a lot of purports, but we'll read some of the pastimes. So we'll do this here. Shri Sukruvacha Ikadatu Mahanajam Kritabhisheka Nayam Bhavashyako Paramaksharam Abhigrinano Muhurtatrayam Udakanta Upavivesha Shri Sukha Uvacha. Shri Sukadeva Goswami said, Ekada, once upon a time, two, but Mahanajam, in the great river known as Gandaki, Krita Abhisheka Nayamika Avashyakaha, having taken a bath after finishing the daily external duties such as passing stool and urine and brushing the teeth. Brahma Aksharam, the Pranava mantra Om. Abhigrananaha, chanting. Muhurta, Muhurta Trayam, for 3 minutes. Udaka Ante, on the bank of the river. Upavivesha, he sat down. Sri Sukadeva Goswami continued, my dear king, one day after finishing his morning duties, evacuating, urinating and bathing, Maharaj Bharat sat down on the bank of the river Gandaki for a few minutes and began chanting his mantra beginning with Omkara. Tacha tadara janharini vasaya jalasaya yasham ikavopa jagama. O king, while Bharat Maharaj was sitting on the bank of that river, a doe, being very thirsty, came there to drink. Taya papiyamana udake tavad eva vidurina narato mriga pate unado loka bayankara udapatat. While the doe was drinking with great satisfaction, a lion was very close, roared very loudly. This was frightful to every living entity, and it was heard by the doe. Tam upasrucha sa mrigha vadu prakriti viklava chakita nirikshana Sutramapi Hari Bhaya Vinivesha Vyagra Hidaya Pariplava Drishtiya Agatatisha Payat Sahasaivo Chakrama. By nature, the doe was always afraid of being killed by others, and it was always looking about suspiciously. When it heard the lion's tumultuous roar, it became very agitated. Looking here and there with disturbed eyes, the doe, although it had not fully satisfied itself by drinking water, suddenly leaped across the river. Tasya utpatancha antavatnya uru Paivagalito yoni nigato gabaha shotasi nipapata. The doe was pregnant, and when it jumped out of fear, the baby deer fell from its womb into the flowing waters of the river. Purport. There is every chance of a woman's having a miscarriage if she experiences some ecstatic emotion or is frightened. Pregnant women should therefore be spared all these external influences. Tat prasavot sapana baya kedatura svaganena viyujamana kasyanchid daryam Krishna sarasati nipa patata chamamama. Being separated from its flock and distressed by its miscarriage, the black doe, having crossed the river, was very much distressed. Indeed, it fell down in a cave and died immediately. And this is the verse with the purport that we will comment on today, which is verse 7. Tam tena kunakam kripanam srotasanu yamanam abhiviksha bhavidam bandho ivanu kampaya rajrishi bharata adaya mitta mataram it yashrama padam anayat. The great king Bharat, while sitting on the bank of the river, saw the small deer, bereft of its mother, floating down the river. Seeing this, he felt great compassion. Like a sincere friend, he lifted the infant deer from the waves and, knowing it to be motherless, brought it to his ashram. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The laws of nature work in subtle ways unknown to us. Maharaj Bharat was a great king and very advanced in devotional service. He had almost reached the point of loving service to the Supreme Lord. But even from that platform, he could fall down onto the material platform. In the Bhagavad Gita, we are therefore warned, Yam hi na vyatyante ete purusham purushasabha sama dukkha sukham dieram somritat paya kalpate. Our best among men, Arjun, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Bhagavad Gita 2.15. Spiritual salvation and liberation from material bondage must be worked out with great caution. Otherwise, a little discrepancy will cause one to fall down again into the material existence. And therefore we have that saying that spiritual life is like a razor's edge. So, little inattention, because the blade is so sharp. But devotional service is very powerful. It's a very elevated platform. It's a very narrow path. You know, you've got to tread each step on the path, one foot off the path and down the edges. Like here, Bharat Maharaj is in the Kaligandaki river, which is in the Annapurna Ranges. You have the very steep, that's where you get the shalagrams. And, you see the buses. Sometimes, actually, they generally have to fly up there, don't they? Quite often devotees, if they want to get the shalagrams, they have to fly. But if there are parts that you drive on in a bus or a jeep, if they just, once they get just, the traction of the wheel is just slightly off, and it doesn't even have to be a big accident, just, the wheel just is slightly off, then it just drags the car over. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. I've had that experience with, one time I was coming back from Queenscliff, myself and Tarini Rupa from the farm. We were driving back from Queenscliff. We'd done catering. So when I was managing the farm, I used to do all the catering. And that's how we maintained the farm, independent. We independently, financially managed the farm without taking money from Melbourne. And anyway, one time we had done the concert, and at the end of the night, we were going to take some things, perhaps come back and get the rest in the morning. But while we were in the tent, at the end of the night, these drunken people started trying to destroy the tent and all our property. And they were literally taking running leaps at the tent, so they were jumping into the canvas of the tent, like, about a dozen of them. And we thought, okay, if we leave, we'll come back and everything will be finished. So we decided we'd actually have to, we had no choice, tell them to get lost first, and then pack everything up, get it all into the trailer and a van, and which I had, and then into Tarini Rupa's car, and then drive back all in one go. So I had a van as my family car, actually. That's what I used for the farm. And when you fill them up and you put a trailer on as well, a van, they don't have much traction on the front wheels anymore. So the van's sort of slightly lifted up. And so we're driving home. As I was just got into Winchelsea, I looked up in the... I was doing about 80, I was going quite slow. And I looked up in the sky, there was this cloud, and it was like a dark moon. The cloud looked like a dragon, and the moon was like the eye of the dragon. I looked at that and I thought, something bad's going to happen, And it just looked like this evil dragon was about to destroy everything. And so I slowed down to 60, although the speed was 100. But I slowed right down to 60. Anyway, although I was going very slow, as I was driving, my front wheel just touched the side of the road, and it just touched the grass, and as soon as it touched it, it just dragged the whole van and trailer off the road. Just lost traction, it just like that. Just touched that grass, it was hardly anything, and going very slow. And I sort of ended up, because what you do for those driving, if you ever in a vehicle and it goes in the direction you're not supposed to go, you go with it first. You don't. The worst thing to do, you're going that way, is to pull it back too hard, then you start rolling. So you actually got to go with it until you get a bit of traction, and then you got to pull yourself out of it. A very similar thing in the same van. We were at Lawn doing catering, and Rock Above the Falls. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's like a big hill sort of thing, and you've got to park down the hill and a little bit on the side. So again, I had this van filled with stuff, and as I came, I thought, they've all got four-wheel drives. I've just got this because I can't afford anything else. As I come down the hill, and I thought, when I turn, I've got this feeling I'm going to roll down the hill like that. And as I sort of turned to park, the van lifted up on two wheels and was about to roll over that way. So what I did again, I actually turned the wheel the way we were going to roll, and it stopped me. If I had to turn the other way, you lose traction. I didn't move, I just turned it, but it just bedded in enough for the van to fall back over. But the point is that, sometimes it's just a little bit off the path, and just there's enough momentum that this is what happened to Bharat Maharaj. There's a little deviation, but it took him a long way. Actually, I heard Kadamba Kanana, His Holiness Kadamba Kanana Maharaj, say it in this way one day. He says, sometimes, devotees tempt Maya, and then she just slaps you down. She doesn't give you a chance. You think, a little bit of mine. So anyway, this is the cautionary tale. That a little inattention, big problem. So it's a razor's edge. So here, anyway, it says that as it will be revealed in later verses, Bharat Maharaj had to accept the body of a deer due to being overly compassionate for this infant deer. So he had to take a whole birth as an animal. So it's a really messed up his schedule. We should be compassionate by raising one from the material platform to the spiritual platform. Otherwise, at any moment, our spiritual advancement may be spoiled, and we may fall down onto the material platform. Maharaj Bharat's compassion for the deer was the beginning of his fall down into the material world. And again, this is another, anomaly that, you want devotees to be compassionate, and yet his compassion was, as Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out, an obstacle to bhakti. So, therefore, we can see that compassion, even good qualities, if they're utilised in order to stay firmly on the path of Krishna consciousness, then that's okay. But as soon as we use the same, materially good qualities, but in a material way, one that deviates us from the path, then that same quality will actually throw us off the path. And so, we see that in Bhagavad Gita, I think it's... is it 2:1? Let me just see. Let me just check the reference. Um, 128, I think it is. Now, you see, with Arjun, Bhagavad Gita 128, Arjun said, "My dear Krishna, seeing my friends and relatives present before me in such a fighting spirit, I feel the limbs of my body quivering and my mouth drying up." So, Prabhupada then describing Arjun's compassion in this particular instance as a transcendental quality. He says, any man who has genuine devotion to the Lord has all the good qualities which are found in godly persons or in the demigods, whereas the non-devotee, however advanced he may be in the material qualifications by education and culture, lacks in godly qualities. So Arjuna, after seeing his kinsmen, friends and relatives on the battlefield, was at once overwhelmed by compassion for them who had so decided to fight amongst themselves. So his compassion for both sides. Prabhupada says, this overwhelmed a kind devotee like Arjuna. Although it is not mentioned here, still one can easily imagine that not only were Arjuna's bodily limbs quivering and his mouth drying up, but he was also crying out of compassion. Such symptoms in Arjuna were not due to weakness, but due to his soft-heartedness, a characteristic of a pure devotee of the Lord. And Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita 5:18-12, that, a pure devotee of the Lord has these all the good qualities, including compassion. So we have to be very careful in this verse here that devotees don't take the wrong idea that in the name of devotional service they should be callous to any living entity. So it's natural for a devotee to be compassionate. In fact, if they're actually to become a qualified devotee, a good devotee, one should develop all the good qualities, including compassion. But then we have to look at it from the other perspective, where that compassion can be correctly applied, but if it's incorrectly applied, then it does become a weakness of the heart. And Prabhupada, and the Gita says that as well. So Arjuna has transcendental qualities, but if the qualities are misapplied, then they're due to a weakness of the heart, the same quality. And in that sense, then a devotee does have to be callous. So you see in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it describes samadhi. The idea is to always be fixed in Krishna consciousness by executing one's duties, and one should be callous to anything which will disturb that. As in the case with Bharat Maharaj, he had to also practice to be callous to things which actually disturb one's duties, which help one to remain Krishna conscious. So there's that verse describing that state of samadhi. And in there, Prabhupada in his purport says, the devotee accepts the bare necessities of life, making the best use of a bad bargain, and enjoys transcendental happiness in Krishna consciousness. He is callous towards incidental occurrences, such as accidents, disease, scarcity, and even the death of a most dear relative, but he is always alert to execute his duties in Krishna consciousness or bhakti yoga. Accidents never deviate him from his duty. Prabhupada quotes here also Bhagavad Gita 2.14. So in this purport in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, he's quoted 2.15, which is, just the same mood as 2.14, that Agama Payananichas Tamste Tikshas Bharata, he endures all such incidental occurrences because he knows that they come and go and do not affect his duties. In this way he achieves the highest perfection in yoga. So that verse that Srila Prabhupada has quoted 2:14 and 2:15, that, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and the disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O Sayana Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So happiness and distress, they come because we have this body, and happiness and distress come to others because they have a material body, and if we identify with this body, then we are subject to the happiness and distress of the body. So then we have to transcend that by verse 15. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. So one has to not be disturbed by the happiness and distress. So in this way, as is discussed, that things happen in this material world, and one has to be very alert to one's activities in Krishna consciousness and not let the disturbances of happiness and distress that affect us or others deviate us from executing our duties in Krishna consciousness and always being Krishna conscious. And at the same time, a devotee who's in that situation always maintains the transcendental quality of compassion, but never misplaces it in such a way as to fall from the path of Krishna consciousness. So we see that, very interesting situation. Prabhupada gives this example, that on a battlefield, sometimes the medics, they go out, the Red Cross, and they have to try and save people who have been shot, blown up, injured, bayoneted, what have you. You can imagine, a very ghastly scene. So they get out there on the battlefield, and Prabhupada says it's their duty. They can't save everyone. They have limited resources, and they actually have to choose that I can't do anything for this person. Maybe a little palliative care, something, some nice words, something. But you actually have to leave that person and go to someone you can save. So one may think that, that's a lack of compassion, but actually, we have this situation in the world now, even in, England, because of the hospital situations being overwhelmed by the pandemic, that they're in a position now, the nurses, the doctors, they're in tears, they have the compassion, they're crying. We have to decide we don't have a bed for these people, not everyone, we have beds for some. The ones that we give beds to may survive, and the ones that we don't give beds to may die. A very, very, hard decision. But that doesn't mean that they don't have compassion. It means that sometimes, but if they make the wrong mistake, not only can they make the situation worse in that more people can die if they're not attentive, and if they're not careful, they can also die in the name of compassion. These days, if you stop to, say there's a car accident or something and you stop, you have to be very careful touching the blood on someone. You might be trying to save their life, but if you touch that blood, and that blood infects you, you can get all sorts of, very severe, lifelong illnesses or deadly illness. So out of compassion, there's sort of so much, and you actually have to be trained as well. You actually have to be very, very well trained. It's not a lack of compassion, but we can't make a show of compassion for the sake of it and disturb one's ability to do the duty and keep oneself protected, or actually more people suffer because we're somehow doing something sentimental, and it causes more people to suffer. In this, the Bhagavad Gita, this concept, we are advised to be compassionate, and Prabhupada mentions it here in this Bhagavatam. We should be compassionate by raising one from the material platform to the spiritual platform. So that's how we're compassionate. That's our general way of doing things. We try to help people to come from the material platform to the spiritual platform. We're not in the business of, because there's very few people in this world who know how to do that. So someone has to do it, and fortunately, Srila Prabhupada has established ISKCON for that purpose. Otherwise, very few movements that know how to do that or will do that. We're not so much in the business that we're looking after the material needs of people one by one. You take one person, you look after them, put them up in your home, feed them, pay all their medicine. We're not in that sort of situation. Nor does it really help the situation of the world if everyone was doing that. So in the Bhagavad Gita, definitely our business is to help. In Bhagavad Gita 5:25, it says that those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So the devotee understands, as mentioned in the purport, that every living entity is suffering because of their immemorial desire to avoid Krishna consciousness. Every living entity in this world is suffering because instead of cooperating with the Supreme Lord, who is literally maintaining them, they want to work competitively against the Supreme Lord, that I am the enjoyer, like that. I am the proprietor, and the results of my work are for my enjoyment, like that. So that's, every living entity is trying to do that. But actually, if we work cooperatively with that understanding, without a doubt at all, the real enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the proprietor, and He is the enjoyer of all our works and the results of all our works. But because He's the Supreme Friend, He wants the results of all activities to be enjoyed by every living entity in cooperation with the Lord. So we're not, as Prabhupada says, we're not enjoyers, we're cooperators. I like that saying. We're not the enjoyers, we don't think of it in that term, we're cooperators. If we cooperate with Krishna, we also enjoy. That's that. So it's because of that lack of Krishna consciousness, and devotees are fixed in that, they understand. That is the solution to all problems. That is the peace formula. You want peace from the miseries of material existence? There's no other way. There's no second way. Anything else you do that doesn't include that, it will fail. It is a temporary solution. But in here, he says, therefore to act to revive this consciousness within the entire human society is the highest welfare of work. One cannot be engaged in such first-class welfare without being liberated in the Supreme. A Krishna-conscious person has no doubt about the supremacy of Krishna. He has no doubt because he is completely free from all sins. This is the state of divine love. So on that platform of divine love for Krishna, one naturally sees that every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore because they're part and parcel of the Lord who they're developing their love for, and they know that Krishna has an intimate and loving relationship with each and every living entity, then the devotees try to please Krishna and help the living entity by helping them also revive that eternal relationship. But unless one is liberated, one can't do that. And as Prabhupada mentions that it's the duty of the physician to keep themselves fit and healthy. So around the world we see, there are doctors and nurses putting their life on the line, but it is their duty to not get sick. Because if they do, they can't do their work. And to do that, they have to follow the rules and regulations of being untouched by the disease. There are strict rules and regulations, and they must do that. Otherwise, if they get sick, they're finished. And so many people, if too many get sick, then of course the whole thing collapses. So it is the duty. Krishna, wants us. It's not a selfish desire to look after one's Krishna consciousness very carefully. If one is doing so for the sake of preaching Krishna consciousness. So, not in the mood of yogis who may not even understand Krishna consciousness as the solution, let alone want to preach it. We're not in that mood. And as that Bhagavad Gita, verse 6. (632). He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and distress. So we know that it is only by Krishna consciousness that we can become happy, and that is the same for all others. He says, a devotee of the Lord always looks to the welfare of all living entities, and in this way he is factually a friend of everyone. He is the best yogi because he does not desire perfection in yoga for his personal benefit, but tries for others also. He does not envy his fellow living entities. Here is a contrast between a pure devotee of the Lord and a yogi interested only in his personal elevation. The yogi who has withdrawn to a secluded place in order to meditate perfectly may not be as perfect as a devotee who is trying his best to turn every man towards Krishna consciousness. So, sometimes in the neophyte stage, where we do not understand how everything can be applied in Krishna consciousness, and we cannot differentiate where sometimes we're attracted to mundane moral or religious principles, which in fact can be obstacles on the path of Krishna consciousness in the neophyte state. Therefore, an artificial show of compassion would not be unusual for a neophyte in the name of advancement. Generally in this world, people like to demonstrate that they will look after so many, unfortunate people or living entities, and in this way they advertise their spirituality or advancement. But as Rupa Goswami explains, if we don't follow the rules and regulations of Scripture, our show of spirituality just simply causes disturbance. It very, very little value. And therefore, if we look at the world, with all the social welfare programs, all the billions and billions of dollars that are pumped into philanthropic charity works, what do we see? We see that poverty is increasing, disease is increasing. even in so-called, civilized countries, in America, England, Australia, actually, the unfortunate, the gap between the very, very rich and, those who are below the poverty line. I was hearing statistics, even in Australia, there's a significant amount of people increasing who there's like 4 basic things that are considered that, you don't have one of those, what to speak of a few, you're in trouble, like a house to live in, sufficient food, a certain amount of money to pay your bills, medical care, educate. There's a few basic ones, and there's a huge percent increasing day by day that just don't have those basic things, and they're considered to be below the poverty line, and that's increasing. That's despite the fact that we're pumping more and more money into, these sort of charities every year than ever before. But one cannot override the laws of material nature. That if one commits sinful activity, there will be a karmic reaction. And one will have to go without certain things as a result of karmic reactions. So that is not an excuse to not show compassion, but we follow the Krishna consciousness process. And of course, our Krishna consciousness process is that we teach people how to become Krishna conscious, but we also distribute prasadam, food. We don't give charity foolishly. I don't want to say too much, but a lot of people, even now, a lot of people receive charity, and it's not going to food and, that. It's going to a good time. They're having a good time with a lot of the charity, a lot of taxpayers' money. The sentiment is there, and, yes, there's a lot of praise and so many things, but a lot of resources around the world going to people who are suffering because of difficult situations is being wasted like that. People are not actually, it's not being spent on the things that perhaps the people need. Therefore, during the COVID shutdown, people spent an extra couple of $2 billion on alcohol and things. Where'd they get the money? And then, of course, because of alcohol and so many different things, there's more domestic violence. Fix one problem, create another. Suffering goes on. Because of the domestic violence, you have to throw more money in to fix that problem. So the material energy, and this was Arjuna's problem. He said to Krishna, I can't find any way to drive away this problem. And that verse, what is that one? Bhagavad Gita 2.8. Arjuna, the same problem that Arjuna was in. So this Bhagavad Gita is meant for everyone, and we can Prabhupada says in the purport, so Bhagavad Gita 2.8, I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to dispel it, even if I win a prosperous, unrivaled kingdom on earth with sovereignty like the demigods of heaven. How much money would he have for charity if he had that amount of prosperity? We'll throw some money around, everything fixed. And the purport says, although Arjuna was putting forward so many arguments based on knowledge of the principles of religion and moral codes, it appears that he was unable to solve his real problem without the help of the spiritual master, Lord Sri Krishna. He could understand that his so-called knowledge was useless in driving away his problems, which were drying up his whole existence. it was impossible for him to solve such perplexities without the help of a spiritual master like Lord Krishna. So as we see, and Prabhupada goes on further, he says, if economic development and material comforts could drive away one's lamentations for family, social, national, or international inebrities, then Arjuna would not have said that even an unrivaled kingdom on earth or the supremacy like that of the demigods and the heavenly planets will be able to drive away his lamentations. So, the general consensus around the world, there's poverty in this country, there's diseases in this country, gather billions of dollars, throw that money at the problem, and it's all gone. And we don't see that working. Therefore, why not take the alternative of Krishna consciousness? Therefore, the devotees, by practical, seeing what was happening there so many thousands of years ago, same thing is going on now, and the same problem with the same foolish solutions, as long as they go on, the problems of existence. So one has to remain spiritually strong. That is one's first duty. If one is not liberated, as Prabhupada said, you cannot engage fully in preaching Krishna consciousness. You actually have to remain on the liberated platform, which means full Krishna consciousness and never deviating from your prescribed duties in Krishna consciousness. Then you will be able to understand very clearly how Krishna can best use us as an instrument to get the maximum benefit for everyone in this world by giving Krishna consciousness. So I'll just leave it there if anyone has any comments or questions on this. Say that again. Prabhupada mentioned once that the problem was he didn't take spiritual advice from his spiritual authorities. What do I do? If you're not sure, ask the spiritual master. Here's this deer. Of course, he's on the spot, okay? Maybe he gets the deer and thinks, okay, I'll make sure it doesn't die. Then I'll ask my spiritual authorities how to deal with the situation. Spiritual authorities will understand that, okay, perhaps just, do what you can, and then, basically, but don't deviate from your spiritual activity. So, but because he failed to properly take instruction from Shastra, that he deviated from, as we'll see, from his own spiritual practices. So that's not recommended anywhere in Scripture. There was some perplexity. What did Arjuna do when there was some perplexity, of this but of greater magnitude? Not just a deer. He turned to the spiritual master. And Krishna resolved that problem for him. So, no, we're not, these things are, difficult, but the main point is here, yes, it's natural for devotees to be compassionate and take the first opportunity to help others and be compassionate, but don't do it at the expense of losing your spiritual life. And don't do it at the expense that, like on the battlefield, that we spend so much time with one person because we're so compassionate to the first person we see who may, definitely not going to live, and all the people who could have lived, we neglect them. So we've actually done more harm. So, we really have to take spiritual advice on these matters. So we're not advocating to be, that devotees should be hard-hearted and callous and non-compassionate. In fact, we're advocating that they're the most compassionate, and they should develop that to be the most compassionate person. But, how anything is applied in the service of Krishna or becomes an obstacle is not always clear, and therefore don't act independently, that's all. That's really the point of it. Don't act independently. Take guidance from those who can guide one, because there's a little slip. After that. Yeah.
I was trying to understand the concept of being a cooperator. You mentioned that because if we understand that we are not the doer, we're just cooperating,
Mm.
and then we'll be basing your effort to answer this question. We just say the strategy in the sense to remain basis in the Krishna's project, Krishna's plan, Krishna's way of doing, and just a cooperator. So being active at the same time, but not the owner or not the controller, just a cooperator.
Yeah, a cooperator. So Arjun was a cooperator. Krishna asked Arjun, you be an instrument in my hands. Now, that doesn't mean that, I'm cooperating with God, therefore everything will be done by God, because He's the actual doer. Actually, He is. He's the actual doer. But although He's the actual doer, He does through us. He uses us as an instrument. So, as an example, when I, cut the children's hair, I still use scissors. Although I'm the doer, I still use an instrument. It'd be foolish to say, "Oh, I'm the doer. I've got to cut the hair." It's not the scissors cutting the hair. They're incapable. They can't do it without me. So, I use the scissors. So, although Krishna is the doer, He allows us to do the work because He likes to glorify His devotee. When you set a diamond in a ring, so Krishna is like the diamond. You set it in a gold ring. The gold looks more beautiful and the diamond looks more beautiful. And they both, the enjoyment increases for everyone. So, that's how we work with Krishna. But each plays its role. They don't, the diamond and the gold, they're different from each other, and yet they're set together, and they complement each other. It's very beautiful. So the devotee and Krishna, when they're together, Krishna likes to beautify the glories of his devotee, and the devotee likes to beautify the glories of Krishna. And together they both shine brilliantly like that. And if the whole world does that, the whole world will, be, very peaceful, be like Vaikuntha. So, but Arjun, in cooperating with Krishna, he worked really hard. He had to be alert. So Krishna's right there with him, but he's not thinking, okay, I'm cooperating with God. I'll just, take it easy for a bit, Any arrows come at me or Krishna, Krishna will take care of it. I'm with God. No. He was protecting Krishna, who's his driver. Krishna's protecting him. He's very alert. He's cooperating with God, but he's very alert as if God's not there. And as Prabhupada said, Krishna never ever said to Arjuna, you sit here on the chariot and smoke ganja and I will do everything. In one lecture. That's not how we cooperate. Cooperate means that if we're going to be an instrument, we keep ourselves, like a blade, very sharp. It's a good instrument. An instrument in the hands of a surgeon or a builder, they keep them, very, very sharp, keep the wheel oiled. We keep, Prabhupada used that analogy, we keep ourselves oiled in one sense. We keep the machine of the body well looked after, because we're supposed to be an instrument. So we have to look after our physical body to make it a really first-class instrument. We don't want to get sick. We don't want to be incapable of doing. We want to do as much service as we can for Krishna for as long as we can, right to our last breath. Not that we get, we do 5 years of service, we've worn ourselves out, messed up our body, and then, we just sort of struggle to do anything for the rest of our life. You have to look after the body so that, you do maximum amount. At the end of your life, you look back, because I looked after my body, so many more plates of prasadam went out, so many more books went out, so many, discussions like that. So, be really very alert. And there are many upheavals, there are many difficulties in family life, with friends, and so many things. We have to be attentive to that if we see that there's a problem, we actually have to be very careful that it doesn't become such a problem that it affects our service. And if there's a problem that's beyond our control, and it is quite a significant problem, we still can't let that affect our service. So it's something, because then that's envy. Say we have this situation, you get this in the workplace, sometimes you get it in a temple. You're doing your service and people are being jealous or envious of you. So what you do is you give up the service. Right? So we'll give the classic example, making garlands. Someone says, all these flowers are for my garlands. And someone else is thinking, but I'm making little Radha Krishna's gardens, I have no flowers. I don't. No, that's so, you shouldn't even be here, You're not even qualified. So you get that sort of thing. Not here, of course, but other places. Anyway, if the person gives up their service, then that's envy of Krishna. Another person's envy affects them and they give up Krishna's service, that's envy of Krishna. Oh, Krishna will be the loser here. I'll not be making garlands anymore. So imagine a mother, she's looking after a baby. Someone says to her, you're not even a fit mother. You shouldn't have even had children. So she puts the baby down, walks off. Then the baby suffers. Krishna should never suffer. Krishna's service should never suffer. Here with Bharat Maharaj, Krishna's service, for the sake of the deer, oh, that's okay. So much attention for the deer, but I'm neglecting Krishna, or his God. He can look after himself. He's God after all. But where's the love? See, the love, gets covered over by personal self-interest. Krishna doesn't need our service, but he's teaching us that if we cooperate with him in love, we become benefited. So we must always keep that love there, the loving service, and out of love, never let Krishna be the loser in any situation, whatever happens in our life or in this world. That is love.
We understand that attitude of effective cooperation in knowledge can be developed over the time. It's not something that every newcomer devotee we can expect to take that attitude.
So you're saying that not every newcomer devotee can expect to come to that platform. Actually, they can. Yeah. I mean, I joined this movement, I'd read Gita, I'd read Nectar Devotion, but I joined. If a devotee said do this, I just did it. I didn't know anything. So I came to the movement with that understanding. I don't know anything. I've read the books, but really how to practice it, live it, I really don't know anything. So if a devotee says to me, do this, I did it. Devotee says, listen, I listen. Devotee says, shut your mouth, I shut my mouth. Pretty simple. And so what they're doing, I'm going to do. Here's some beads, chant Hare Krishna. Okay, I'll chant Hare Krishna. eat this prasadam, don't eat that, don't go there. We were so much in those days, at no stage were we out of the association of another devotee. If we went out on Sankirtan, I've told this story before, if we chanted our rounds, we chanted with other devotees. Because usually these days you see the chanting, I said, with Bhara Maharaj lost his focus. Devotees chant, they'll sit in the courtyard, they've got the beads, Hari Bol, Prabhu, yeah, nice to see you, how you going in the lockdown, it's all good, yeah. Oh, a bit of paper, pick up paper, chant. Where was the focus? But if you chant with another devotee, the devotee say, are you chanting or socialising? So I remember one of the first times I didn't chant in the association of devotees. It was like a rare event. And we had a bit of a park. We were in Sydney and we had a bit of a park. And, so devotees, we'd chant. Sometimes you'd walk around the park with some devotees. So I just sort of wandered off by myself. So I came back when it was time for, greeting the deities. And the devotees were like, what happened here, Ganga? Where were you? I said, I went for a walk. Oh, by yourself? So it was a big, the devotees are talking. What happened? So if devotees just follow the other devotees who are doing the right thing, then from day one, there's no reason why they can't do exactly what needs to be done. This is what I said is the problem about Maharaj. He didn't consult. If we feel, and here, this devotee, one of the things that really strikes me about this whole, purport, Bharat Maharaj was practically on the level of love of God. Prabhupada's quoting Bhagavad Gita 2:15. It's one of the basic foundations. That's what went wrong. I've passed that. I'm up to the Gayatri mantra where I'm meditating upon Lord Narayan in the sun. He's non-different. He's situated in the heart of... I've passed, Bhagavad Gita 2:14. I'm now, on some higher level. So these, concept of just not even following the basic principles. So these days, devotees can be very independent, more independent. It's the way the movement is. As long as everyone is Krishna conscious, that's okay. If devotees can live miles away from the temple, they can work independently. If they're Krishna conscious, that's what we want. You want that. The devotees literally become Krishna conscious and are able to just work independently and even go out into the material energy and preach Krishna consciousness and not be tainted by the material energy. Go into their offices, go into the factories, and they're not touched. You want that. But if they're being affected by the association within their factory and the offices, they have to communicate and discuss with the devotees how not to be affected. They have to take, not to feel that, oh yes, well I've read Bhagavad Gita, I've read Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, so why do I have to talk to a devotee? It's my own work, it's my factory, been there for 10 years. Why do I have to talk to another devotee about that? And at the same time, the devotee may be unable to chant their rounds, or when they're chanting the rounds, they're thinking the trouble's at work or the trouble's here or what have you. So we actually, if we keep association and follow that association, and here, even Bharat Maharaj, on the platform of almost Prema Bhakti, needed to discuss with another devotee about Bhagavad Gita 2:15.
To do a sustainable, or if we want to develop a sustainable attitude, has to be that complemented aspect of discussing, cultivating, understanding, not just following what the others are doing.
if this can happen to Bharat Maharaj, such an exalted person, we should never be so proud to think that I'm beyond discussing my aspects of my devotional life with suitable devotees who I feel, that discussion is very helpful. And we should never feel, well, if I speak with such and such a devotee, they're going to be talking to me about Bhagavad Gita. I want to be talking about Ananda Vrindavan Champu and Kavi Kanapura's this and, the pastimes of Radha Krishna, so, I'm more on a higher level. This devotee is talking about these verses from the Gita, so I'm sort of past that. As you see, there's a problem in that, isn't there? So, so be very, very careful. Never neglect the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, all the more advanced situations, realizations of Krishna consciousness, they don't remove, it's not that you, push aside the previous realizations because now I've got higher ones, I've got something better. No, they rest on it. They rest on that foundation. If there's no foundation, you can go high, 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 it all collapses like that. So devotees should read Bhagavad Gita every day for their entire life. And even if they do that, they'll, Sanjaya, if they read the Gita every day for the rest of their life, they'll just become more and more thrilled at every moment just by reading Gita, what to speak of other aspects. If one is not being thrilled at every moment by reading Gita, they definitely need to read it. And they need to hear it from a devotee who is being thrilled by hearing the Gita. Anyway, we'll leave it there. So much nectar. Thank you. Hare Krishna.